Well, how's everybody doing today? Okay, that was a terrible response that reflected a terrible, cloudy exterior, okay? So I'm asking you one more time, how's everybody doing? That's okay. All right, we're going to roll with it. Hey, I'm Nick. I'm one of the pastors here. So glad you were here. If you're a guest, man, we want you to feel like a VIP. We have a really just kind of a different creative service today. We're going to go incredibly deep in some stuff we're going to talk about. But before that, I've got a few quick announcements. Number one is this, next steps. If you heard the message last week or you're here today and you're trying to figure out, hey, what's my next steps in this church? I've been coming a while, what do I do? How do I get involved or whatever? This is actually replacing our culture training. So if you've been through culture training, you serve, you don't have to come to this, but it really is, we just want to make it as clear as possible, it's your next step. If you want to just show up and say, hey, listen, I'm going to explore what it might look like to serve. You're not committing to anything, you're just coming to a meeting. We're going to have, it's going to be about 45 minutes. It's going to be on those 2 dates. You only got to go to one. And it really is just you're taking your next step and saying, hey, I might be interested in potentially serving. It's the most non-committal step you can ever take in your life, okay? So that really is coming up, though. We're excited about that, and we are getting ready to open our building, and it's exciting. If you want to be a part of our opening and help us serve and reach the city, this is your next step. So with that said, speaking of our new building, reaching our city or whatever, I want to tell you a story that happened last week that just kind of blew me away, and I was so just kind of shocked by. We have this initiative called Bold, and you can give to it. It helps fund our building and what we're doing, and it's going on right now. And if you want to do that, you can take that step. But every Sunday, I get a printout and I get some notifications, whether emails or task lists about, kind of certain things. So I get text messages, hey, here's how many people we have, here's some information, how much money we got, blah, 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 whole deal. And one of those things I get is just kind of an update on, if somebody does something a little bit different or unique or whatever, my team, they try to keep me in the know, and here's what you should know, what you shouldn't know. And so I got a task reminder that says, hey, listen, you need to write a thank you letter to this young boy. He's 10 years old, and he gave to our Bold campaign. And I thought that is an incredible, incredible story. A 10-year-old boy steps up, believes in what we're doing. That is awesome. I loved it. But then I saw how much he gave. Kid gave $100, okay? And so I was like, man. So my instinct was like, there's no way he gave that. So I called his mom. I was like, hey, here's the deal. First off, thank you. You're awesome. Okay, you're doing a great job. You're killing it as a parent. Money to you. That's great. Did you give him the money? Because listen, how many of you grew up? I grew up in a Baptist church where they passed around the offering plate in the pew, and my mama would sit back almost every week, be like, here's $1, put $1 in. Anybody's parents ever do that? Like, you feel good about yourself. You're like, I gave. You really didn't. But anyway, you just felt good about yourself. So I was asking, I said, hey, did you give him the $100 to give to Bold? And it was so awesome and so great. She goes, no, I didn't. And I went, really? She goes, yeah, I think he's doing better than we are with our campaign, And she's kind of owned that. It was a very awesome moment. And she said, he works really, really hard. And he had some big jobs this summer that he's been working with, and he got several $100s. And he believes in the church and what we're doing, loves this church, and thinks it's incredible. And just wanted to fund it and make sure that we keep doing what we're doing. That was so humbling to me. I was like, man, when I was 10, I'd have bought an Xbox, okay? Like, that's what I would have did. Like, I'm thinking, man, this kid's more godly than me. Let's put him up on stage. Like, next week, if he's preaching a sermon, now you know why, okay? Because, man, it was so incredible. So anyway, I just want to share with you, for those of you that are partnering with us and helping us build this church, thank you. I want you to know that even 10-year-olds are stepping into that. And if you're not stepping into it yet, I want to invite you to help us. We have an incredible tool, and that's all it is. That River Lake Church it's a movement, it's a people, but the building is a tool, and we get to leverage that tool to hopefully reach more and more people, create some more space, create some better environments. And if you'd love to help us, you can always, anytime, write us a check. Just put Bold at the bottom of it and let us use that for our building. So anyway, with that said, hey, we have a unique experience coming up in the next few minutes. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to pray. We're going to jump in and go a little bit deeper than normal. So let me pray. God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for the world that we live in. Thank you for the experiences that we have. Thank you for your word that inspires and moves us. I pray that today would be helpful. It will be challenging. And that you would give me the words that I need to say. More than normal, God. Pray that today would just be a next step for so many people in their walk with you. We love you and thank you so much. Amen. All right. Well, hey, Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different than I normally do. I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to sit down behind this. I'm going to turn my iPad on, and we're in the middle of this series called Under Review, and the whole series is really based on taking a second look at some stuff that we think we know or we've already looked at. And today's question that we're taking a second look at it, is there really a God? Is God real? Are you a theist or an atheist? Do you believe in a God or do you not believe in a God? Because I think there's some stuff that we maybe assume as a Christian or maybe assume as an atheist, wherever you're at. And if you're an atheist, I'm so glad you're here today. I'm so glad we built this church for you. And matter of fact, you can belong before you believe. That's the whole point of this church is we just sit back and said, listen, we want to be united under belonging together, not necessarily having to believe everything. So we're asking this question, and today I want you to imagine, doing a little bit different, that we were sitting over coffee at Starbucks, and we were both drinking black coffee, because that's what Jesus would drink, okay? Pretty sure he drank coffee, and I'm pretty sure it was black. He doesn't have that froofy little, mint, cappuccino, whatever, sliced onion, pepper, whatever. Anyway, so, I don't even know what they put in that stuff. It's just black, straight up black coffee. We're having coffee. And we're talking about this question. I want you to imagine just you and I having this conversation because I'm going to go, and I'm just prepping you, I'm going to go deep today. So if you like deep, man, buckle up. If you don't like deep, please come back next week, okay? Because that's really, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper than I normally do today because we're going to hit some issues that normally church, I think, don't hit, but I think it's incredibly, incredibly important because what I have found is this. That as I talk to people, what I find is, and this is what we're going to cover for the next few weeks actually, there's a lot of atheists who steal from God and act more like Christians than they realize. And there's a lot of Christians who steal from atheists and act more like atheists than they realize. And there's some disconnects. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to put all this under review, and we're going to talk about what it really means to have a worldview and have an understanding of there is no God. And I'm going to push some. If you're here today and you're an atheist, I'm going to push you. I'm going to say some stuff that might challenge you and challenge some conclusions that you have or maybe some stuff that you never thought about. If you're a Christian here today, my hope I would strengthen and encourage your faith. Because what happens is I find that many people are intellectually inconsistent. I remember talking to my son. When he was about 10 to 12 years old, he is an incredibly bright kid. Okay, I know you think your kid's smart. Mine's smarter. Okay, so anyway, I just got to say that. I'm obliged to. But anyway, Nick is incredibly smart. The rest of them, they're okay. But my oldest, he is incredibly, incredibly smart. He would ask questions that were so deep and profound. And we would talk all the time. And he didn't believe in God. And he was very open about that. In our household, we're very clear. Like, you can believe whatever you want to believe. It's a free, open household. You can question your faith. Matter of fact, I would say that if you have a faith that you can't question, you should probably throw that faith away. So we have this household where you can question faith and you can engage in dialogue, and I'm never going to control what you believe because that doesn't work anyway, right? So we would have all these open conversations, and Nick was very adamant for a long period of time that, like, Dad, I don't believe in God. And I'd be like, Dad, that's okay. But I would push him. I said, listen, I don't care what you believe, but you're going to be intellectually consistent. That you're going to have a consistency. You're not going to be dumb in your beliefs. And it's okay for you not to believe in God, but you're going to be smart about it. So he was okay with it, be like, okay, Dad, that's cool. But every now and then, to his detriment, I think, he's got a dad who's incredibly sarcastic, who's a little bit quick-witted, and man, loves to debate and argue, okay? And we would be sitting there watching the news or talking about something, and something would happen that would be wrong. Somebody would be murdered, there'd be a war going on, something would happen. And he would look at me and he'd go, Dad, I don't understand why people do that. That's so, here's the key word he'd say, wrong. And I would, being the antagonistic, sarcastic, quick-witted person, I'd look at him and go, you can't say that. You can't say that's wrong. And he would get really mad, and he'd kind of know where I was going after the first 2 or 3 times I did this. He'd be like, Dad, stop it. I'm like, no. Here's the deal. I can say that's wrong because I believe in a God, and there's an objective moral truth and standard with which to live by, and I can say that. You can't say that. You can be a non-Christian. You can be an atheist. I don't care what you believe. You're just going to be consistent. Don't be intellectually inconsistent, because if you don't believe in a God, whether it's a Christian God or a different God, if you don't believe in a God, there is no way you can have right and wrong. There is no way you can stand on good and evil. And again, if you're here today and you're an atheist, you'd be like, well, yes, I can. That's where we're going to go today. Because, again, my fear is that there's a lot of people, Christians that steal from atheists and atheists that steal Christians. And I don't care where you come down the line at. That's your choice.
I believe that Jesus is better than not. But whatever you believe, I just want you to be intellectually consistent. So today we're gonna run down some stuff as far as what it means to be an atheist. Because what I hear from atheists a lot is this: that Nick, you know what? Maybe you've heard this. You have faith. I have facts. That as an atheist, as a scientist, I have all the facts and you have all the faith. You just have this blind faith in a God, in a creator. It's the God of the gaps argument that, you just have this kind of understand that if you can't explain it, that God must do it. It's a God of the gaps argument. And you have faith, but, Nick, as an atheist and scientist, I have facts. And there is nothing further from the truth. In fact, we're going to cover 3 specific areas here this morning. And there's more than 3. I just chose 3 because I just had a limited amount of time and nobody'd stay here for a full hour, so that's why we chose 3. I chose 3 that we're going to unpack because here's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to tell you up front. I actually think it takes more faith, not fact, faith, to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian. Here's why. Number 1 is this. If you're an atheist and there's no God, first thing you've got to believe is this: something came from nothing. That something was created by no thing. That somehow the universe began and all the stuff and all the material and the chairs and the buildings and the dirt and the cosmos and the stars and the sun and this mass universe that we are so incredibly small. We are like a speck of dust on a beach in, okay? Like all of that something somehow was created from no thing. That no thing created that, which it defies every law of science. That science would flat out tell you that nothing can't create something, right? I mean, listen, let me put it this way. If you walk down the street and you see a car, you don't sit around and go, wow, I'll bet nothing created that. You sit back and go, wow, that's a Ferrari. That's nice, I like that. I'd like to buy that. Why? Because you don't sit around and go, I'm just going to wait in my driveway and hope that nothing all of a sudden turns into a Ferrari. You don't do that. You don't walk through life and go, man, that's a sandwich. Hey, honey, the craziest thing happened. Like there was nothing and now I got a sandwich. I love this house. That's possessed, okay? Just so we're clear. That happens, run, all right? Because that defies life. Like you have to deny the laws of science to come to the conclusion. You have to have faith that all of the laws of physics apply right now, but from one of the most critical moments in time and space, the singularity, that all of a sudden those laws of physics are not in play and somehow nothing created something. And I don't know about you. I just don't have enough faith. I don't have enough faith to believe that nothing created something. I sit back and I would say, no. Something, some being, some God that is external, that is outside of both time and space, that is eternal, that is not bound by the laws with which was created, and creation created this first thing. There's a first cause. But if there is no God, you've got to come to the conclusion. You got to be intellectually consistent and admit, you know what, listen, I just believe this, that if you go back far enough, nothing created something. Everything has to have a creator. Now, Lawrence Krauss, incredibly brilliant cosmologist, is at Arizona State. I watched several of his debates preparing for this. I watched a few of his presentations and things like that. And he had a line that was just hilarious to me because this is a problem for scientists. This is not a new argument to bring up to scientists. Hey, listen, you have to kind of do some really, technological and theoretical hurdles to kind of get to the fact that nothing created something, right? And they've been trying to figure this out because you've got to have a lot of faith. It's not something you can prove scientifically. It's a belief that you have to believe in. Lawrence Krauss was doing something, and he had this line, and I wrote it down. I literally hit pause, and I went back, and I listened to it 3 or 4 times to make sure I wasn't misquoting him, but this was hilarious. He said, I quote, "Nothing really isn't nothing anymore because of physics." That somehow, in their world, nothing isn't really nothing, it's actually something, and that something created the nothing, that as also is now the something, as though that's this whole circular kind of deal, that something's really nothing, and nothing's really something, and the whole deal. That nothing really isn't nothing anymore. We really is something. Doesn't make any sense. Pretty sure that he needs to look up a dictionary. But if you have a worldview, if you have a worldview where there's only physics, biology, and chemistry, that's nothing but materialism, then you're going to have to jump through some hoops. You're going to have to jump through some theoretical hoops. You're going to have to check your brain at some level, and you're going to have to transcend and go away from the very facts that you say point to know God and go into belief in theories that you can't prove and that really deny everything that you see in front of you. And again, could that be true? It could be. I mean, the statistical probabilities of that action, of nothing creating something, are ridiculous, but could it happen? Absolutely. I just don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I just think I can look at it and go, yeah, all the laws of physics apply to the very beginning, and something that defies the laws of physics, something that's outside of it, created something. It just makes sense to me. And maybe you don't agree with that, and that's okay. I'm not trying to convince you to be a Christian. I'm just trying to point out some intellectual inconsistencies. But if you believe in that, here's the second one you've got to believe in. That first life came from no life and no help. That the nothing created the something, and the something that didn't have life, that was just kind of rocks and sun, that something all of a sudden, through no life and no help, all of a sudden created new life. This is an even more ridiculous assumption and belief system. Because again, it's a belief. You can't prove it scientifically. As a matter of fact, it defies the laws of science. It defies them. Nobody's around there going, you know what, there was no life on my table, but now there's a life. I got a puppy now. Look at this. Woo. Like nobody does that. You can't test it. You can't look at it. You can't prove it. It's a belief system. And as I've said, I don't have enough faith. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. To sit back and check my brain at the door and some levels go, yeah, nothing created something. And then that something that was created from the nothing, that something through no help and no life created new life. Because the misnomer is this, and this is what you'll hear some people say, well, it was simple life. No. See, that's not accurate. There's no such thing as simple life. There's just simpler life. The simplest life has DNA that has hundreds of thousands of strands of code. And that's the word that they use. Bill Gates came out and said once they mapped the human genome that the DNA is the hardwiring, it's the software code of how we're made. And again, I don't know about you, but if all of a sudden I see code in something, I just come to the conclusion that somebody made it. If I see a book with lines of code or words on it, I don't sit back and go, you know what, I'll bet nothing created something. That something came together and formed that book. That's so amazing. As a matter of fact, if you told a scientist that, he'd think you're crazy. He'd think you're a crazy Christian lunatic who's walking around making up things and believes in fairy tales and magic. But it's that very same assumption that they believe in, that something was created from nothing and that something created new life. There's a quote from a retired biopsychologist, Israel Ramirez. And in my research doing this, I looked up many different atheists, and I want to make sure I wasn't misquoting and I was as educated as I can be. And let me qualify this by saying this. I have a master's in divinity, not cosmology, okay? So I'm just going to qualify this just so we're clear, all right? But I did do my homework. I did do my research. Here's what he said. I read this quote, and I thought he was making fun of himself. I really did. I couldn't believe he wrote this. This is crazy. This is an article you can read online. He said this. He's talking about the nothing creating something and the something creating life. Here's what he says about the very first life. The simpler, not simple, simpler life. He says this. The first living thing must, look at the words he's using, must have had hundreds of genes and a strand of DNA possibly having hundreds of thousands of base pairs. The probability of that is ridiculous. Here's what I thought was so fascinating. He just owns it. And again, you read it and you're kind of like, you're punking yourself, right? Like this doesn't even, like you hear yourself, right? He says this. It's hard to imagine that natural, non-living processes, that the something that had no life and no help, the natural, non-living process produced anything that complex, but it must have happened. Must have happened. Why? Because in an atheistic world, all you have is chemistry, biology, and physics. And all you have is the material world. And if that's all you have and there's no outside help and there's nothing that's going on and nothing created something, and something has to create the new life, and as improbable and as impossible as it is, as ridiculous as it sounds, it has to be. Why? Because I have faith that there is nothing more than what I can see, touch, or feel. Let's not forget that many of those same people would sit back and say there's probably about 13 to 14 dimensions, that none of which they can see, touch, or feel. But we're just going to ignore that logical inconsistency and deal with the rest of their logical inconsistencies. Because it takes a whole lot of faith to believe that there is no God. It takes a whole lot of faith to come to the conclusion, you know what, I don't believe in God. I don't believe that he's real. I don't believe there's a creator. It takes a whole lot of faith. And as I said, I'm going to say it over and over again. I just don't have enough faith. I don't have faith to be an atheist. Because the argument of you have your faith and I have my facts is just so backwards and so wrong. It's crazy to think. The last one from a scientific standpoint is this. It's the concept of, listen, if you look at the world from a scientific standpoint, scientists won't argue this. Atheists won't argue this. Our universe seems to be incredibly fine-tuned for our existence. From the physical laws, from the physics, from the scientific code, which we go, the philosophy, from everything. Our planet, the rotation, the distance of the sun. We are literally, some may know this, we're in the Goldilocks area of the sun, meaning that we are not too far away from it to be cold. We are not too close of it to burn up. We are just right. That everything in our world, from the oxygen to the planet, to the distance, to everything, the rotation, everything seems to point, from a scientific standpoint, not a belief standpoint, from a scientific, everything seems to point to we were made for this universe. Everything seems to point to that. And again, atheists won't argue that. What they will say is this, and again, and there are other issues, and if you've got some other ones, you're like, Nick, what about? I'd love to have, I'll buy you lunch, we'll go talk about it. I love talking about this stuff. I geek out on this stuff. If you want to know, what do I do during the week for fun? This, okay? I love this stuff. But let me just tell you, here's the theory they came up with. Because it is so ridiculous, and the odds of nothing creating something, and that something creating life, and then this universe being so finely tuned for us, because of all three of those things, the probability of not just one of those coming through, but all three of them coming through, that we are here right now. They came up with a theory, and it's a theory of what is called the multiverse. Meaning, in their theory, because you can't test it, it's not science, you can't prove it, you can't look at it, you can't do anything with it. It's a belief system. That there's a theory out there that, you know what, there is an infinite number of universes. And if you have an infinite number of universes, guess what? You have an infinite number of chances to produce the outcome you want. And of course we're here, because if you have an infinite number of outcomes, then one of those outcomes would absolutely be this. Which that makes sense. It really does. It's a true theory. If there's an infinite number of universes. And here's the deal, that could be true. Again, I have my master's degree in divinity. I don't have it in cosmology. But here's where I'm going to push back. That's a belief system. It's based in a theory that you cannot test. There's not a single shred of evidence for a multiverse. And those scientists who look at Christians or look at theists and go, yeah, you guys just view your faith. But I want to tell you about my multiverse. I just got to tell you, it takes a whole lot more faith to ignore what seems plainly obvious in light of science and the world we live in. It takes a whole lot more faith to ignore all that and say, yeah, I think there is no God. There's infinite universes. And what they have to do to mess with that is crazy. There was a spot, I did some research really quickly, a few weeks ago actually, on proof for the multiverse. And there was one thing that they came up with, and I want to explain it really quickly, just if you go back home and kind of Google it. I don't want you to think that I didn't know what I'm talking about or whatever. There's a spot in the universe that's cooler than what they think it should be. And recently it was disproven. The theory that they thought of why it was cool was kind of disproven of what they thought it was. And what they've come to the conclusion is some theories to line up the multiverse is, listen, what if the reason that part's cooler is because it's a bruise? I don't even understand that understanding, but it's a bruise from another universe. See, it's crazy when Christians get accused of the God of the gaps. If we can't explain it, God did it. And yet scientists do the same thing with the physics of the gaps. But if we can't explain it, it must be physics, it must be our belief system. And so when they disproved this whole soft spot, there was a quote from a guy named Tom Shanks, and here's what he says. And I want you to see the disconnect, the illogic, and the steps that you've got to walk through to kind of come to this conclusion and where it comes from. He says this, the cold spot, he says that this means, this disproven cold spot in the universe, this means we can't entirely rule out that the spot is caused by an unlikely fluctuation explained by the standard model. That's a fancy way of saying there's a pretty good chance that our current model, flat universe, start, finish, one universe, physics, chemistry, biology, materialism, all fits, that it's just something about it. We don't have an explanation yet. There's a really good chance that's it. But look at what he does. Again, I'm quoting people that don't believe in God. I'm not quoting, Christians. He says, but if that isn't the answer, meaning if science, the way that we think science can explain it, if physics, the way that we think physics understands, if physics can't explain it, then there are more, and here is just the most creative word. I love this word. I couldn't get past this when I read this. I was like, oh my goodness. There are more exotic explanations. Because see, when a Christian believes in the ridiculous and the miracles, we're called crazy. When a scientist puts belief in some crazy outlandish theory, it's just called exotic. And it's not intellectually honest, and it's not intellectually consistent. That there is a lot of faith that you have to have in order to come to the conclusion that there is no God. And I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm not going to have that argument. I'm going to talk about that next week. Well, all I'm saying is, listen, it just takes a whole lot of faith. It takes a whole lot of faith to be an atheist. I just think it takes a whole lot less faith to come to the conclusion. You know what? There is a God. Now, here is the crazy part. For the rest of our time, I want to shift, and I want to talk about the conclusions of this. Because it's one thing to talk about whether there's a God or not. It's one thing to talk about the science, which I think all of it points to a creator. All of it points very obviously to something. It's one thing. There are some inconsistencies, and there are some stealing. In fact, I would say atheists steal from God. They steal from God in a way that is not intellectually consistent in order to hold their beliefs. Because if you take atheism to its logical conclusion, you can't live that way. I can't live that way. It is unlivable. Because here's what the smartest people would say. Smartest people in the world, the atheists that would sit back, Sam Harris and Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and all these guys that wrote in books and, the four horsemen of the whole deal, they would sit back and they would come to some conclusions. And I'm going to give them to you really, really quickly. Number one is this: there is no you. What I mean by that is this: if all there is the physical, chemistry, biology, physics, if that's all there is no you. You are only a body. You don't have a body. Which you've never thought about it like that probably. But if you think about the way that you talk, whether you believe in God or not, you would sit back and say, yeah, my body's doing this. My body is aging. My body is this. And we talk about it as if we are some external kind of force, external kind of being, and that we have this body, we have a body, but we aren't just a body. But atheists will sit back and say, no. If all there is biology, chemistry, and physics, all you don't have a body, you are a body. C.S. Lewis writes in some of his writings, he says, listen, I am a soul. That's what I am. And I have a body. Atheists would say, no. There is no you. You are an illusion. You are not really here. All you are is just your brain, your mind, and you're just responding. You're programmed in a specific way, and you have no choice. You're just a body. You don't have a body. You are a body. And that's an uncomfortable, unsettling conclusion. And it may or may not be true. I'm not trying to argue for one way or the other. I'm just saying, listen, if you're an atheist, that's the logical conclusion. That you aren't really here. You just have a body. That's hard to wrap your mind around. But it gets even worse. Because if you are just a body, if it's not that you have a body, if you are just a body, it erodes the second logical conclusion when you take it through. And again, scientists would back me up on this. This isn't me trying to draw a straw man argument up. I did the research. Several scientists believe this, that if you are just a body, then here's the deal. You have no free will. That in an atheistic world, there's no such thing as free will. Everything is determined. Okay? There's no such thing that you're just a body, and much like when a doctor takes a hammer and hits your knee, and all they're looking for is a reaction. You have no choice in that. You didn't choose it. You didn't sit back and go, okay, the moment he hits my knee, okay, I'm going to kick a little bit, and then I'm going to try to kick him in the foot because it hurts. You know, like you have no, like you just react. The atheist would sit back and say, the smart people, the people that are much smarter than me that have thought this through way, way more than I have, would say, listen, if you're just a body, if you're just a moist robot, programmed to respond and react to whatever the situations and moments that you're caught in, you have no free will. That everything's determined. If you go back far enough, the wheels of motion were set and it's random and it's chaos, but you have no choice because there's no you. And so every time that you feel like, oh, I want to do this, but I can't, or I won't, it's not really you. That was already pre-programmed. That was already decided. You're just living out your existence. Stephen Hawking writes it like this. And again, going back to it's not livable. He says, I've noticed, Stephen Hawking, the famous scientist, said, I've noticed that even people who claim that everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it, look before they cross the street. I love that. That I can do nothing. Oh, it's all predestined. You can look before they cross the street. Well, of course I'm going to look. I don't get a hit because if you have some control over that. Christopher Hitchens, again, one of the famous debaters, atheist, hates God, was debating William Craig, and one of the things I was watching, kind of just trying to figure out this and kind of wrap my mind around this a little bit more. And in one of the debates, they pushed him on and said, listen, but if you believe you're an atheist and there is no God, then you have to believe in determinism. And there is no free will. Is that what you believe? Is that what you're saying? And he kind of hem-hawed around and he kind of gave some sarcastic answers because he's really sarcastic. And even when they pushed him and said, no, answer the question. Here was his kind of half-hearted admission, and at the same time, half-hearted sarcastic answer. He came to the conclusion, he said, I don't think we have any choice but to have free will. It's not helpful. But it's true. Richard Dawkins wrote the book God Delusion. Soon after 9/11, when there was a big upswing in men and women who were atheists and writing against God and religion and everything like that, he probably put it most succinctly. He said, DNA neither cares nor knows. DNA just is. And we dance to its music. He says, somebody, and according to him, nobody wrote a code in you. That's your DNA. And all you can do is just dance to the music that's being played. You have no choice. That literally everything is determined. And that's an uncomfortable conclusion. That if you're like me, everything in you fights it, everything in you says, no, I do have a choice and the whole deal, and fight against it. And I would say, yes, I do believe in free will. But to come to that conclusion, that I do have a free will, and yet I don't believe in God, you have to steal from God. Because listen, if there's just nothing but the material, there is no free will. The only way you have free will is if somehow you are more than just chemistry, biology, and physics. It's the only way to come to the conclusion that you have free will. But if you have no you, if you're just a moist robot and there is no free will, it comes to the last conclusion. It's where I want to land the plane today with you. It's the last thing I'd say, and it's where I'd push you on. And I'm going to try to do my best job to communicate this clearly. I don't think I've done a good job the first two services. But if atheism's real and there is no God, then there is no good and there is no bad. The pushback that I hear from people is, Nick, if there is a God, why is there so much evil, pain, and suffering in the world? And let me qualify my answer. I'm not going to be super helpful to answer that question. What I am going to say is this. The moment that you say the word evil, you are invoking a standard, an objective standard, with which proves the very existence of the thing that you're trying to disprove. You can't do that. It doesn't make sense. It's intellectually inconsistent. Let me put it in a hopefully an incredibly simple way. The shadow proves the sun. See, we live in a world that has a lot of shadows, has a lot of evil. But you don't have a shadow without a sun. The shadow is actually a lack of something. Darkness is a lack of light. Cold is a lack and an absence of heat. and evil. The very thing that an atheist would say disproves God is the very thing that I think and argue would prove God, because evil is not a thing, it's an absence of good. And if you're here today and you say, Nick, I don't believe in God, that's okay. You can believe that. Man, I'm glad you're here. I just want you to know, you can't point to evil and suffering, though, as a way to say that there is no God, because the moment you do that, you're stealing. You're stealing from an objective moral standard that transcends your personality, your personal preference, public opinion, and human progression to disprove the very thing that you're against. You can't do that. It's not intellectually consistent. As a matter of fact, let me just say this. Let me push you a little bit harder, make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable. If there is no God, there is no right or wrong, period. That we are randomness. That we're this hunk of rock distant from the sun, that we're lucky to be here, that everything's random, that everything is done, everything's determined, and there is no right or wrong. You have no ability to be morally upset about anything that happens ever, good or bad, because there is no good or bad. It's just your personal opinion. It's just public opinion. It's just what you think is best for humanity, as Sam Harris talks about. Sam Harris talks about if it's human flourishing, then it's what's best. Well, that's just his opinion, though. And just because he's smarter than everybody else doesn't mean he's right. Because he's pre-programmed to think that way, and really we shouldn't believe what he says in the first place. Because he really didn't think it through. It's just responding. Now, let me pause. This is what I did not say in the first two services. I want to clarify. I'm not saying that you can't be a good person and you can't be morally good without believing in God. Let me be clear. Some of the most moral people I know don't believe in God. They really do. And on the flip side, and maybe some of you, maybe this is why you don't believe in God, some of the most immoral people I know do believe in God. They're like, I believe in him. What are you going to do this weekend? I'm going to go da-da-da. They're like, okay, what I'm not saying is if you believe in God, you're a moral person. If you don't believe in God, you're an immoral person. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is you have no basis to stand on. You have no right to call anything good or bad, evil or nice or right or wrong. Because to do that, you have to have something that transcends your personal preference, public opinion, and human progression. You can't do that. It is intellectually dishonest and intellectually inconsistent to stand up and say, my view, my personal opinion, because I have nothing else to base it off of, is better than your random personal opinion. It's just not honest. All you're left with is subjective moral opinions. And the smartest people in the world, the smartest atheists in the world would admit, Nazi Germany, personal opinion. It's not morally right or wrong. We shouldn't do it. But even that's my personal opinion. Slavery. It's not morally wrong. It's just personal opinion. Because at the end of the day, if everything's random and there is no God and there is no you and there is no free will, you can't get mad at somebody for somebody who does not have free will. You don't get mad at snakes for biting you. You might kill it, but you don't get mad at it because it's just acting out the behaviors and design it was made for. So that's it. That's the deal. And I just got to tell you, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. In fact, I believe Paul wrote something a few thousand years ago that I would argue is more important today than I believe when he wrote it. He said something so incredibly insightful in light of this, in light of the fact that we have science now that I would argue points the probability. You can't prove either way. When somebody says, listen, science disproves God, it shows they are ignorant of what they're talking about, because God is a philosophical issue, not a scientific issue. And when you have a religious person says, I can prove God, they are ignorant of the conversation also. You can't prove either one. All you have is probabilities for either one. And I would suggest that the probabilities of atheism are ridiculously long odds. And when you put them all three together, even worse. But Paul writes this, and he writes to the church in Rome. Here's what he says. He says, since what may be known about God is plain to them, meaning you can look at the world around you, you can look at science, you can look at relation. You can look at yourself and go, no, I'm more than a body. I'm not just a body. I have a body, but I'm not just. You can look at it. You can look at the philosophical and scientific arguments. It's plain because God has made it plain to them. Next verse. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, meaning the world came to existence, and that moment proves that there's a God. That moment, because nothing can't create something. You know that. That proves, he goes on, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Don't miss this. Paul writes this. He says, listen, you don't need the Bible to come to the conclusion that there is a God. You can look at science and the facts. You can look at the philosophy and come to the conclusion, no, I'm not just a body. I have a body, but I got something more to me. And I have free will. It's why I feel guilt. It's why I feel shame. It's why I feel pain. It's why I feel remorse. There's something more. There's something built into me. I have a body, but I'm not just a body. You can look at yourself and you can come to the conclusion that certain things are wrong. That's bad. That's not right. Much like my son who was struggling for years of his life, going back and forth, being intellectually inconsistent in his faith, in his walk with God. And I'm challenging you, I'm pushing some of you today. I get that. To just be honest. If you don't believe in God, you don't believe in anything, that's cool. Just be honest. But you can't live that way. I know it. Because that's not how you're made. You were made, if you just look at the world around you, by a God who loves you, who cares for you, who's coming for you, and wants desperately to spend all eternity for you because you have eternity in your heart. You're made that way. And all science, and all facts, and all philosophy point to that conclusion. You are not living by blind faith. You have educated, informed faith. So, I want y'all to stand with me. This week, here's what I want you to do. If you're here today, and you say, listen, Nick, I don't believe in God, or I've never thought about this, or there's some stuff to think about, or whatever. I've never thought about this. Yeah, I would say that I don't believe in God, but I don't believe in those other things. I don't believe that I don't have free will. I don't believe that there is no me. I think there's a me. I don't believe I'm just a moist robot. I don't believe in that. I want to encourage you. Would you just open your mind a little bit? Would you maybe go back and listen to this, or do some research, listen to some other sermons? There's much smarter people about me that have talked about this. And just maybe, let me just challenge you a little bit. Maybe not be so narrow-minded. Maybe get up in the morning, first thing out of your mouth, God, if you're real. No one's going to know. No one's going to hear you. God, if you're real, would you make it clear to me? Would you make it clear so that I do not have any excuse? I believe he answers those prayers. I believe he honors those requests when we honor him. For the rest of us, if you're here today and you say, yeah, Nick, I'm a Christian man. I know this was deep. I know it was just, we don't go this deep normally. Okay, I get all that. A little bit different day. I get that. I want to encourage you to do one of two things. One, I want to encourage you to go back and maybe re-listen to this or do some other stuff and remind yourself, because here's what I believe. At some point, every single Christian will walk through, probably more than once, an identity of Christ, a crisis of identity. Something will happen. Somebody will say something. And you will be tempted to sit back and go, do I really believe in this? And is it just blind faith? And, I had a professor tell me I was at college, or I had a circumstance, or where was God, and why is there evil? And just, you will have something. I just want you to know, it's not blind faith. I want you to be assured that you are walking in the light. But the last thing I want you to do is, would you be open? Much like I'm pushing the atheist, would you be open to pray in this prayer? God, bring somebody in my world. Let a conversation open up where I can share why I believe what I believe. Because it's not blind faith. It's not ridiculous. It's not this thing where it doesn't make any sense. In fact, I would argue, and I've argued the whole day, it takes a whole lot more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a Christian. Would you be open to that? I'm going to pray. We're going to dismiss you. Next week, we're going to finish this conversation, because today, hopefully, I tried to prove that there is a God. But next week, I want to talk about who is that God as we continue our series, Under Review. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for your grace, your mercy. Thank you that you have made it evident in the world that your world, your creation points to a creator. Help us know that. Help us embrace that. Help us be confident of that. Help us take that confidence and share it with the world and the people around us. We love you. We thank you so much. Amen.
God bless. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.